Chapter 4, starting lesson 1, graphing using an XY table. Just a few things here you should probably copy down about the coordinate plane if you don't remember. Quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, quadrant 4. Quadrant 1 is identified with positive x, positive y values. Quadrant 2 would be the negative x, but positive y. Quadrant 3, negative, negative. And quadrant 4 would be positive x, negative y. Just a couple things here about coordinates, how we write them. We always write them in alphabetical order, x comma y. X will be the positive x goes right, negative x goes left. Positive y goes up, negative y goes down. Just a few things that are probably common knowledge for most, but you never know. Now a few example problems here of how we graph equations using an XY table. There's some steps here that are provided for you. The first step would be to choose 3 to 5 x values to plug into the equation. Typically we want to try to keep them small so we can keep them on the grid that we have provided. Okay, sometimes you have to make decisions with fractions, but as you can see in this problem there are no fractions. We plug those x values in for x, and then we solve for the y value, fill into the table, plot the points, and draw the line. So let's take a look at how this goes. I'm going to choose my x values first. I'm just going to choose, it says 3 to 5, so I'm going to pick negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, and 2. That way I get a few negatives and a few positives. I'll demonstrate how to plug one of them in, and then I think you could probably figure out the rest. So if I plug in the y value of, say, 2, or excuse me, the x value of 2, I'm going to have 3 times 2 minus 5. And now I solve that. 3 times 2 is 6. 6 minus 5 is 1. So y ends up being 1 when x was 2. So we fill that into our table. And you go ahead and you do that for each of these other x values and check. Once I have all my points in the table, I go ahead and plot those points. If you have points that end up falling off of your grid, then that's okay. Plot the ones that you're able to. That'll be my, my motto here. So 0, negative 5, 1, negative 2, 2, 1. Once you have sufficient points, you go ahead and connect the dots. So you draw your line. Now the only suggestion that I make is that you extend that line the whole way across the graph. Okay, that is definitely a piece that, more times than not, I see students that do not extend their line the whole way across the coordinate plane, and that's what we need to do. Let's go ahead and try another example. Example 2. So here's where we have to, have a little bit of strategy to it. When I start to select my numbers for x's now, because I'm going to multiply by 2/3, okay? Now this is tricky for some of you, and some of you will struggle here, and you may just pick numbers and get messy decimals, and that's okay too, that works. But I would like to pick numbers that when I multiply, this makes a whole number. And the way I do that is by choosing a number that has a multiple of 3, because 3 is the denominator. Okay, so choose multiples of the denominator. That's your hint whenever you're trying to plug in and there's a fraction. So I'm going to choose 0 because that's the easy one, right? I'm going to choose 3. I'm going to choose 6. And I could maybe throw in there a negative 3. Okay, and same idea. I want to plug these in. So let's say y equals 2/3 times 6 plus 1. Now the advantage there would be that I know 6 times 2 is 12, divided by 3 is 4. So y equals 4 plus 1, so y equals 5. So I fill that into my table for the 6. And I go ahead and repeat the process until my table. Once I have my table completed, I go ahead and plot the points that I can plot. Okay, and I'll be able to draw my graph. Again, reiterate the point that we're going to extend that graph the whole way across the coordinate plane. Okay, and one more example here. For today, what happens, we have a table and x and y are on the same side. It's actually called standard form. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a few days. But same thing, I still want to choose values for x, and to try to time this out and play this out to make sure that they're divisible by 4 is kind of tough to do. So in this particular case, I'm actually going to choose just a few numbers and go from there. So let's say 0, let's say 1, 2, and 3. And I go ahead and plug those numbers in. 0 is a nice number because when I plug in 0 for x, what I'll notice is that whole term goes away. So 3 times 0 is 0, and I get negative 4y equals 12, which means y is negative 3. So I go ahead and plug that in for my 0, negative 3, and then you want to go ahead and plug these other numbers in and find your y values. So you'll notice here I do get some messy numbers when I do this, some messy fractions. Doesn't always make this extremely easy to solve, but oh, I got goofed up that last one. There should be a 0.75. Sorry about that. But I plot my points the best that I can. All right, and again, I draw my line the whole way across the grid. Okay. For my answer. Okay. And you want to use rollers when you draw your lines, please. That will definitely be a standard that you have to live up to.